Welcome back to the ScreenCrush Break Room. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in the first episode of What If. In the opening of the show, Uatu is narrating.
Time, space, reality.
Now you may have noticed that these are also the names of Infinity Stones, the special minerals that make up the fabric of the universe. I don't think this is accidental. The Infinity Stones will end up being a key part of the multiverse going forward, and could even be tied to Nexus beams. I'll go over all of that later in the video. And by the way, I have a ScreenCrush trivia question for you that I'll have the answer to at the end of the video. What Game of Thrones star appeared in First Avenger? I thought it was interesting that in the intro we see Thor without a beard, so even at this point we're already starting to see variations. And we actually see this beardless Thor in one of the trailers, so these might all be alternate versions of these mainline MCU heroes. So the glass cracks, forming a prism of the multiverse. Here we see glimpses of future episodes, including Marvel Zombies, very excited for that. The visual of this cracks in the glass spreading are also reminiscent of the ending of Loki, when the multiverse spread out of control after He Who Remains died. And at this point, the voice of Uatu begins to echo,
Where a single choice can branch out into infinite realities,
symbolizing these other parallel realities. So I just want to give a brief explanation of who Uatu is. The Watchers are a race of near-omnipotent space aliens who once tried to interfere in other cultures and instead created a nuclear holocaust. Afterwards, they took a vow of non-interference, kind of like the Prime Directive in Star Trek.
I'd say that's slightly more important than the Prime Directive.
We've actually seen the Watchers before in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
At that time, I was a Federal Express man.
Uatu is the Watcher who is assigned to Earth. And, by the way, in the comics, he interferes all the time. But here's the thing, ScreenCrush, the Watchers also have a secret connection to the Celestials, the big Tron guys that we saw in this Guardians flashback and like Ego.
I'm what's called a Celestial, sweetheart.
In the Earth X comics, it's revealed that Earth is actually incubating a Celestial baby, and the Watchers are working for the Celestials to safeguard their young. And the Celestials also created the Eternals, so this show could end up having a major tie-in to the Eternals movie. Moving on. At the end of the intro, the original theme from the first Avenger plays.
A skinny kid from Brooklyn became Captain America.
And we see a shot of the shield frozen in ice from First Avenger. So now let's talk about this point of deviation. The Watcher says it's here when Peggy decides to watch from the floor.
No, I'd prefer to stay.
There. That's the moment.
That's actually not the first deviation we see. Beforehand, she and Steve have a conversation that's absent from the movie.
Paris has fallen. London might be next. If this works, you could end the war. We mere mortals can only dream of doing such things.
So it could be that this conversation inspires Peggy somehow to not go up into the balcony. Also notice that Erskine's speech now occurs when everyone is on the floor before the experiment. In the film, everybody was in the balcony during the speech and then returned to the floor afterwards. Now this is important when we talk about the sacred timeline. Now, as we've discussed in other videos, the sacred timeline from Loki is actually made up of many timelines with small deviations from each other. In this case, Erskine gives a speech above or below. These variants were allowed to exist because they never created Kang the Conqueror. But Peggy's deviation is the moment that makes this radically skew away from the sacred timeline, like we used to see on the monitors and Loki. Another key difference, Bradley Whitford's character, Colonel Flynn, is also present. Now we've actually seen this character before in the Agent Carter one-shot that spun off into the Agent Carter series.
No one is above protocols, not even Captain America's old flame.
The one-shot showed the backstory of Peggy and Howard founding S.H.I.E.L.D.
Tell her she'll be running S.H.I.E.L.D. with me.
It also showed the difficulty of Peggy being one of the only female agents in the SSR, the other one being here, That's Your Mom. And in this reality, the Hydra agent not only kills Erskine, but Tommy Lee Jones's Colonel Phillips. So Peggy gets into the chamber, and just like Steve, the first remark afterwards is about her height.
How'd you feel?
You won't be needing those heels anymore.
She's also kept out of service, just like Steve, and then takes it out on a heavy bag, just like he did after being unfrozen. She also follows this up by kicking a weight into her hand and throwing it, just like Steve used to flip up his shield. Steve even mentions to her that she could be put to work selling war bonds like he was in an alternate reality.
Each one you buy is a bullet in the barrel of your best guy's gun.
And when they talk about dancing, she repeats her line from the main MCU reality.
The right partner. Maybe you haven't found the right partner.
This show is so great because it has a very relatable premise. Everyone has looked back and wondered, what if? What if you'd finished high school? What if you bought that He-Man lunchbox off eBay? Or, for a lot of guys, What if I wasn't losing my hair? Well, guess what? You don't have to lose your hair. The best way to prevent hair loss is to start when you still have hair left. That's why I use Keeps, the sponsor of this week's video. There's a history of hair loss in my family, so when my hair started to thin, I didn't waste any time. So believe me, if your hair's starting to thin, don't put it off. Start using Keeps now. Treatments can take up to 4 to 6 months or more to see results, so it's important to act fast. And you're gonna need to start early and stick with it. The sooner you start using Keeps, the more hair you'll save. It's even proven to work on a watcher's scalp. Keeps has more 5-star reviews than any of its competitors, and hundreds of thousands of men trust Keeps for their hair loss prevention medication. So if you're noticing that you're losing your hair, do something about it. For a limited time, go to keeps.com/ScreenCrush or click the link in the description to receive 50% off your first order. Back to the Easter eggs. Then we see other variations when the Red Skull goes to Tonsberg. This was also the Norwegian village we saw at the beginning of Thor, and it's the site of New Asgard and Avengers Endgame. Now, for some reason in this reality, Stark is way more on top of the existence of the Tesseract. Or maybe actually he was in the first Avenger, but just off screen. He says,
"Given the gamma signatures coming off that clock tower, what they were looking for could power London for a century."
You'll remember that the Infinity Stone radiation is gamma, which is why Banner was brought in to find the cube in the Avengers.
Tell them to put the spectrometers on the roof and calibrate them for gamma rays.
And why he was able to pull off the snap.
But the radiation's mostly gamma. It's like, I was made for this.
It's interesting that when Odin hid the Tesseract, he didn't think to shield the gamma radiation. Now, the Red Skull is not voiced by Hugo Weaving. Weaving famously hated playing the Red Skull, or at least hated his time in the makeup chair. So, in Infinity War, he was replaced by Ross Marquand, who also voices Red Skull here. He also adds in a new, more accurate description of the Tesseract.
The Tesseract was the jewel of Odin's treasure room.
Able to hold the power to rewrite the very laws of physics and unlock doors across the universe.
And we also see a new section of the carving depicting the monster at the end of the episode with the Tesseract at the center. Now, this monster is actually called Shuma Gorath. It could end up being the big bad of this series, responsible for creating the Marvel zombies and maybe appearing in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I'm going to go into all that a bit later in the video, and we have a video coming out tomorrow that talks about how it's going to be one of the key live-action villains in Phase 4 and 5. So in this reality, because Peggy is not on a USO tour, she's able to intercept the Tesseract. Stark gives her the uniform that was intended for the USO, which makes me wonder if Steve might have had a hand in designing it. Remember, in the comics and the movie, he was an artist who designed his own suit.
I had some ideas about the uniform.
When Peggy drops down for her superhero landing, we see her take a pose that Steve Rogers has shown off before. Afterwards, Howard uses the Tesseract to create his own Iron Man suit. Now, believe it or not, there's actually a precedent for this in Agent Carter. In one episode, the SSR has confiscated several of Howard's inventions, including an unstable energy vest that would lay the groundwork for the arc reactor that Tony would refine in Iron Man.
That is the prototype for a new system of armor.
So, you might be wondering, why didn't Howard ever create the Iron Man suit, since he had access to the Tesseract for decades? Well, I have some theories. So we know that Howard studied the Tesseract ad nauseum, leaving diagrams of it in his journals that he left to Tony. So maybe, in the main reality, he saw the weapons that Zola built with the Tesseract and decided that this kind of energy shouldn't be weaponized. Now, S.H.I.E.L.D. must have agreed, because they used the Tesseract to build an engine in Captain Marvel. Then they didn't even try to replicate Hydra's weapons until Thor came to Earth.
We learned that not only are we not alone, but we are hopelessly, hilariously outgunned.
Instead, Howard studied the Tesseract to help create his new element. Now, we know this because it was in the journal that Tony studied that gave him the insight to create this element. That element stabilized Tony's arc reactor and became the key to long-term green energy.
I'm kind of the only name in clean energy right now.
So Peggy storms into the Hydra base like Steve did at the climax of First Avenger. They save Bucky, and then she says,
"Well, then we better start dancing."
Echoing First Avenger.
I might, even when this is all over, go dancing.
Also, just like Steve, she ruins perfectly good bikes. And of course, the whole sequence ends with Bucky repeating his line,
"Let's hear it for Captain America!"
Let's hear it for Captain Carter!
And just like in First Avenger, we have a montage. So, Red Skull wants to summon the true champion of Hydra, Shuma Gorath, and it looks like the tentacles of the monster informed the design of Hydra's logo. But we've actually had hints of this subplot before in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. That show revealed that Hydra is actually hundreds of years old, and its true goal was to summon an ancient inhuman called Hive that had been banished to another planet.
No need to remain concealed in the shadows.
At the bar, Peggy reveals that she can't feel the effects of alcohol, just like alternate Steve.
But the serum doesn't allow me to feel the effects.
I can't get drunk.
And I really love this heart-to-heart between the two of them. It helps dive into their characters in a way that, the movies can't, because this allows us to see that Steve is the same person, even if somebody else had gotten the serum. It also shows us that Peggy loves Steve for Steve and not for his, he says,
"I'm still that skinny kid from Brooklyn. Now just in a big metal suit."
A sentiment that Peter Parker would echo decades later.
This is all I have. I'm nothing without this suit.
Also in this conversation, Peggy talks about how her success has afforded her the same respect that was usually reserved for men.
I'm no longer screaming to be heard, to be seen, to be in the room.
And remember, all of this started because Peggy chose to be
in the room where it happens.
I also love that this scene ends with a goofy 1940s transition. When Steve is in the Hydra Stomper, the interior shots of him are a neat steampunk noir-type nod to Tony in his Iron Man suit. They really should have known this was a trap, because there's a stupid Hydra logo right on the stupid train. When Peggy saves Bucky, he says,
"Woo! Thanks! You almost ripped my arm off!"
Yeah, well, The loss of Steve and his capture by Hydra is of course a variation of Bucky's fate in First Avenger. Afterwards, they track the Tesseract to Castle du Croc in the Black Forest. Now, this is not a real castle, but I'm wondering if they chose this name because it's similar to Kraken, the ancient tentacle Greek sea monster.
Release the Kraken!
The machine that creates the gateway looks like a Hydra with several arms. It's a very nice design touch. And then an actual Hydra eats the Red Skull. Just like in the first Avenger, he was eliminated by his own hubris. So, when Peggy is pinned against the wall, she draws a sword from behind a shield, much like Arthur drawing the sword from the stone. Now, in the moment, this is a fun parallel to show that she, like Steve, is worthy. But this might not just be any old sword. See, in the comics, Captain Britain has a deep connection to the multiverse. Merlin, the wizard in King Arthur's court, was the first person who discovered and categorized the multiverse. Then he made sure that each multiverse had a Captain Britain to protect it, and each candidate could choose one of two weapons, the Amulet of Right or the Sword of Might. If Peggy Carter is the guardian of her reality, then this could be the Sword of Might. In some comics, it even allows Captain Britain to travel between universes. Which brings us back to Shuma Gorath. This tentacle monster is normally a Doctor Strange villain who terrorizes the multiverse. Previous trailers have shown heroes from different realities meeting, perhaps to fight this monster. If that's the case, I wonder if these could all be Nexus beings. In the comics, Nexus beings are, they're like the linchpins of their reality, the one constant that makes the universe hum. WandaVision heavily implied that Wanda is the Nexus being of her reality.
Nexus. Because the world doesn't revolve around you. Or does it?
Now, we have a video coming out tomorrow that fully explains Shuma Gorath, its role as a big bad villain in this show and in Doctor Strange 2, and maybe how it's going to be used by Kang the Conqueror. So subscribe and keep an eye out for that one. And this ending was a real bummer. I mean, even in this reality, Peggy and Steve just can't win. So I'm presuming she emerges around 2012 at Project Pegasus, the same place we saw the Tesseract being experimented on in the Avengers. Barton and Fury are watching just like at the beginning of that movie. And this line,
"Ma'am, please put down the sword,"
is a parallel to this one.
"Sir, please put down the spear."
And just like in First Avenger, Nick Fury is the one to break the bad news.
The war ended almost 70 years ago.
I do think that we're going to see Peggy Carter return in this show and maybe appear in live action. She's definitely going to hop dimensions. Like the Watcher said, she gave the multiverse a new hero. And now here's the answer to our ScreenCrush trivia question. What Game of Thrones star appeared in First Avenger? Natalie Dormer.
Tell that to their wives.
I don't think they were all married.
You're a hero.
Well, that's all the Easter eggs that I found, but if you found any, let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.